another tutorial on our How to Make a Buildup series, and today we're going to focus on making the drums for our buildup. We're going to do 3 different loops. One of them is going to be the main loop for our song. The second one is going to be the start of our buildup, and the third one, we're going to take that buildup and rise it all the way up to the climax. Let's get started. I've taken a couple samples off of YouTube, a kick and a snare, and this is what they sound like. I'm changing the tempo to 140 BPM. I'm going to make a loop between measures 2 and 3 just to keep it very, very concise here, and I'll move the kick to the very, very beginning of that. The snare I'll put right in the middle, and this is what it sounds like. Now when you cut your sample off of YouTube, you may not have cut it exactly at the punch of the attack of that snare. So you may need to do a couple of adjustments one way or another to make sure that your groove is locked in. Now that we're done with this kick and the snare, let's get to the hi-hats. For this, I'm going to use a software instrument. So I'm going to hit the plus symbol right here, select software instrument, and hit create. In our library, which you can turn on and off right here, find a drum kit, and anyone will do. The SoCal kit right here is perfectly fine. I'm going to move it right up to the top so we have everything organized, and I'm going to make an empty region by command clicking in the arrange window. Once we're there, if you double click, you can have access to drawing notes down at the bottom. Let's preview the sounds first. So I'm going to pull up musical typing with Command K and make sure that the octave says C1. Once we're there, the black notes are the hi-hats. Alright, we're good to go. Let's start drawing them in. So I double click the region, make sure that we are at C1, and we're going to command click to add new notes. Let's hear what that sounds like. Alright, now just as you fine-tune the adjustment of the kick or the snare, you may want to do that as well with the software instrument. Maybe if we move these slightly to the right, it could create a little bit more of a swing feel to it. Let's see. So now that we're done with our notes right here, let's go on to the mixing to make sure that all of the sounds are clearly heard and nothing is too loud or too quiet. When you do this, you may want to focus on what are the most important sounds relative to each other. In this case, I think that the kick should be the loudest, followed by the snare, followed by the hi-hats. So let's make some minor adjustments here. Now, if the screen is getting a little bit annoying for you, there's this little icon right here that says Catch Playhead. If you turn that off, then the screen won't move. Might make your life a little bit easier. Okay, so now that we're done with the volume mixing here, let's go on to some EQ. In particular, what we want to do is remove a lot of the low sounds from anything that isn't a kick or a sub sound, so that that low end really has some space to shine. We're going to start with the hi-hats first. I'm going to pull up the EQ by going up to the smart controls right here, clicking that, and making sure that the master is not selected because we are only focused on this track, not the master track. Once we're there, hit EQ, and we are good to go. You want to click the first node right here, which is usually not turned on, and that'll create a high-pass filter so that you can cut low sounds. So I'm going to preview this while cutting as much as possible without losing the character of those hi-hats. And this is before, and this is after. I'm also going to add a little bit of sparkle there and cut out some of the extreme highs. Okay, that's good enough. I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the snare. So I'm going to cut out, except this time I'm not going to cut out as drastically because we do want a little bit of that body that we can find around 120 hertz. So let's listen. Just going to add a little bit more body there so it can blend in nicely with that kick. Always try to do this, if possible, without soloing the instrument so you can get a good idea of what the mix is sounding like. Alright, so now that we have the EQ set, let's go on to the next loop, which is the start of our buildup. I'm going to take all of these sounds that we just made, and I'm going to duplicate them over by hitting Option and letting go. Alright, I'm going to move over the loop to bar 3. And this time, I'm going to duplicate the snare, the kick, and put it on every quarter note. This is what this sounds like. Okay, now that we have the kick and the snare hitting at the same spot right here, you may need to make some adjustments just so that they're lining up correctly. As far as the hi-hats, you may want to change something up a little bit as well, just to make it a little bit more interesting. How about adding some ride cymbals? Let's try that. Alright, so we are done with our first build-up loop. Now let's take the other one, which is going to rise up to the climax. I'm going to do exactly the same thing as before by duplicating it, option clicking, and then dragging, just to duplicate everything that we just did. In this case, I'm thinking about making this one twice as long and making the kicks twice as fast. So if we option drag this, just as we did with the other ones, you'll notice that some of the kicks will overlap and be on top of each other. That's not what we want. So to make things clean, you may want to shorten them first and then option drag them over. That way, nothing is getting in the way of anything else. Let's listen to this. Okay, perfect. Now for the final part of this loop, I want to make the kicks even faster and create a little bit of a break here. Now keep in mind that this is all just creative ideas that you might have that are totally different, and that's what the fun is as far as this goes. You can really experiment and find a way to make a build-up that's different and unique, but it doesn't have to be. Okay, so I'm gonna copy this loop right here, make sure that the playhead is aligned, and I'm gonna paste them in. Maybe about there. Alright, perfect. We have our first loop, our second build-up loop, and then our third climactic loop. We are ready to put them all together. Now, whenever you're putting everything together here, you want to think in terms of measures like 4, 8, 16, 32, things that are easy for a DJ to mix in and that makes sense as far as the structure of your song. I'm going to make mine 8 measures long. The way I'm going to do it is by making the first loop be twice as long, and I'm going to make the second loop be twice as long as well. Right now we are at 6 bars long, so to make it a little bit more interesting, I'm going to take the first loop, except this time I'm not going to have the snares. So it's going to start out a little more sparse, and little by little things are getting added on and becoming more intense. This is what it sounds like together. Alright guys, if you've made it this far, you are almost done with your build up. Here comes the fun part, adding the synths. So stay tuned for the next video and we're gonna get cracking.